For this video, I went to the worst part of Seattle, Washington. If you dig around online and ask people who live in Seattle, it's pretty clear where the worst parts of Seattle are located. It's all in an area on the south side of Seattle here, in an area that surrounds the King County Airport. You could also call this part of town South Seattle, and the areas I'm going to drive through are South Park, Rainier Beach, White Center, and Beacon Hill. It was a dreary day in late October, and as soon as I got off the highway and made my way towards the first neighborhood, immediately I saw streets filled with homeless people. This is something you see all over Seattle. All of a sudden you turn a corner and there's a bunch of people living on the streets. Similar to what I saw in Portland. I don't know how people just decide right there's a good spot, but clearly seems to be a good spot. However, most of what we're going to see in this video isn't going to be a lot of homeless camps. You can learn about Seattle's massive homeless camps in another video I did. For the most part, the areas we're going to see are all neighborhoods without homeless encampments. We're going to begin in Beacon Hill, located here, just off of I-5, about 5 minutes south of downtown. Now you're going to hear me observe throughout this video, the worst parts of Seattle are not that bad visually. There aren't blocks and blocks of boarded up homes and houses in disrepair like you would see in many other large cities. Perhaps that's because of how valuable real estate is here and how expensive Seattle is. There's no real cheap housing in greater Seattle anymore, as I'm sure you've heard. However, there's lots of poverty, drug use, gang activity, and crime in the areas we're going to visit. I wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. Here in Beacon Hill and many of the other neighborhoods we're going to drive through, crime and poverty are both some of the highest in the city of Seattle. Overall, violent crime in Seattle's higher than the national average, but far less than in places like Chicago. It's about as violent here as it is in Jacksonville or Louisville. The big problem in Seattle is property crime. Seattle's the 14th worst place in the nation for thefts, robberies, and break-ins. And a lot of that has to do with the large number of homeless people here and the lack of police enforcement. As you may know, Seattle's become a place where criminals prey because cops are outnumbered and lack the morale they once had. And don't forget, Seattle's taken away money from its police budget. If you're curious, for perspective, a home here in Beacon Hill costs about $730,000. Yes, and hopefully that helps you realize how expensive Seattle is. This neighborhood isn't a disaster by any means, but $730,000? So I went to some of the worst parts of Seattle on the south side, Rainier Beach, and some of the areas that are clearly have been identified as the worst in Seattle. They're not that bad. I mean, I've been to some really bad places. Why does the south side of Seattle get such a bad reputation? Besides the fact that it's clearly the most dangerous and poverty-stricken part of Seattle, is that why? There has to be a worse part of town everywhere, and that happens to be it.
Some of it probably has to do with the port being down on the south end of Seattle. They have the port there, and then it's just kind of a big industrial park, and so it's not necessarily an area that you have to avoid, because there's some various fun activities and stuff down in there that you can go do, but it's, I guess, being from Seattle, you're not used to windows having bars on them and stuff, because only Lake City, that area of Seattle, and then maybe a handful of others have the metal bars on the windows and stuff, and so it gets your attention in that sense of being oh, there must be some crime in this area if they have to protect their facilities that much better.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever hear about bad stuff happening in South Seattle, some of the areas I went to? What kind of stories do you hear about coming out of there?
Is a really poverty-stricken area, and so I'm pretty sure it's gang activity ends up being really high in that area, and so occasionally you'll end up hearing of a shooting down there or something else. But again, nothing like any of some of the neighborhoods across the country.
So it has a bad rap because it's historically been a poor area, and it seems to be improving a little bit, but that's still where a lot of the poverty and crime happens in Seattle. Is that fair to assume?
Partly, yeah. I mean, there's usually anywhere south of the 90 usually has more people that are prone to not pay their rent. So, I mean, during COVID, there were more people who was prone to be that were on their way to being evicted than those that live over the 90, meaning the I-90. So, unfortunately, yeah, it does. When you have that kind of history going on for a while, it's going to take a long time for them to get their reputation at least back to neutral zone, if there was any. It's
Yeah.
just the way it is.
Now we're going to travel to another one of Seattle's worst neighborhoods, to a part of town called White Center. It's located way down here, west of State Route 509. This place has the nickname Rat City because there were rats everywhere down here at one point in this neighborhood's history. It's cheap here, which means it's really diverse. The average home price here is $575,000, which is far less than in Beacon Hill. That's a steal for Seattle. The roads are old and damaged down here, and businesses have trouble staying open for long periods. At night, White Center gets really shady with car break-ins and shootings. But again, you might look at the place during the day and think, this doesn't look too terrible at all. A lot of people probably find this undesirable, and I can see why. Streets without sidewalks and curbs. Just kind of looks like your normal older, poorer Washington neighborhood, really. Kind of see why this might get a bad rap. A couple blocks from Rainier Ave South is where we are. Maybe 15 minutes out the downtown. But again, this is not that bad. You people in Seattle have it made. I will tell you that, mister. This looks to be pretty run down. Not terrible, though. Our next stop on our Bad Seattle Hood tour is Rainier Beach, a part of town well known to many people in Seattle. There's about 12,000 people in this neighborhood, located on the southern edge of town. This is actually the second most dangerous hood in Seattle. Crime here is 158% higher than the national average. Everybody here has a 1 in 14 chance of being victimized every year. It's not Georgetown bad, but it's bad. It's not uncommon to hear gunshots in this part of town at night. It definitely has what you could call a vibrant street culture. It's a poorer working class neighborhood, but this part of town is slowly being gentrified. Rainier Beach High School is also the least white high school in Seattle. Only 2% of the population is Caucasian. Homes in Rainier Beach sell for an average of $675,000. Just wow. Rainier Beach, be honest with you, if this is bad for Seattle, Seattle has it made. Like, this is one of your worst neighborhoods? What in the heck? Don't think a lot of people in Seattle proper ever even come down here. They just heard it's probably dangerous, and this is where a lot of the crime happens, so they automatically think it's ghetto. For our last stop and final worst neighborhood, we're going to visit South Park, which is surrounded by a large industrial area on the south side of town. To me, this neighborhood looked the least run down of all, but it also is the most dangerous neighborhood in Seattle. Crime here is nearly 200% higher than the national average. There's a big problem with stolen cars here down in South Park. People here have a 1 in 11 chance of being the victim of some type of crime every year. Homes here are the cheapest of all, at just over $500,000 each as of this writing. This part of town is too facing gentrification, but currently has the highest percentage of Hispanic residents in the city of Seattle at nearly 50%. Now we're going into a neighborhood called South Park, also on the south end of town. So we're now in South Park. We're gonna go down some neighborhoods over here so y'all can see what that looks like, because I don't think a lot of people in Seattle ever come down here. Am I right? Well, here it is. South Park. South Park, Seattle. I mean, the surrounding area is pretty beat up, but like this neighborhood is not bad. I'm gonna just break the law a little bit. I mean, there clearly might be a bad part of town that's terrible, but like overall, I've been driving around for 15 minutes and I do not see the hood. And I'm sure at night it's probably pretty bad down here. Always is. Always is. So that's it. The tour of Seattle's worst neighborhoods. And as we saw, they are really not that bad at all. Some folks that don't have a lot of money. A lot of the area down here in the south side is pretty industrial. There's a lot of distribution and manufacturing and transportation stuff going on. Maybe that's why it's viewed as less desirable. I mean, it's beat up a little bit, but it is not terrible. Hey everyone, so it's pretty clear by now that elected leaders aren't going to help you. If you don't like what you saw in this video, demanding change won't work. You're going to have to do it on your own. If you want to be safe and want your community to be a place where people want to live, you're going to have to clean the place up yourselves. You're going to have to work with your friends and neighbors to lower crime. Politicians clearly don't care as much anymore. It's up to us.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.
And are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation.